know what we did at our office? We removed the chairs from the back of the room.
So you just have one row.
Well, would they? No, he's changed the room around. Oh, he's doing all sorts of things with it. Bought some computers so he can do different design patterns based on needs. Oh. The chairs from the back. So now people are searching for chairs that they'll be able to stand because they don't want to be up there.
Good morning, everybody. I see it's 9 o'clock, so we'll call our meeting to order. Welcome to the December meeting for Iowa 911 Communications Council. We'll start our introductions to my right here, and then George, if you can take a mic and do introductions out in the crowd, please.
Robert Johannesson, Iowa Department of Public Safety.
Jack D'Angelo, Sully Telephone, representing small telcos.
Mike Bryant from Ames, representing the Iowa Professional Firefighters.
Rob Rotter, representing Iowa State Sheriffs and Deputies Association. And let me add before I forget, for those trying to watch, the live stream is not working this morning. The conference call is working, and the meeting will appear on YouTube as usual, but just the live stream right now is not working.
Jeff Anderson, Marion County Emergency Management, representing the Iowa Emergency Management Association.
Tracy Bearden representing Iowa NENA.
Blake DeRushi, Iowa Homeland Security and Emergency Management, 911 Program Manager.
Hamburger representing Iowa Firefighters Association.
See if this, ooh, geez. George Griffith, Iowa Peace Officers Association. That works. Wow.
Kara Sorrells, representing Iowa.
Bob Seibert, Harlan, Iowa.
Christine Meckler, Legislative Services Agency.
Kinski, Pella Police Department.
Marsha Spikehorn, Pella Police Department.
Dwayne Voss from Raycom.
Rick Mortensen, Iowa Department of Public Safety.
Scott Rounds, Des Moines Police.
Jeff Edwards, Des Moines Police Department.
Amanda Roush, Story County 911.
Bernie Snoddy with BKD.
Tyler Gross, Geocom. Stacy Gross, Geocom. Brian Madewell, Westcom.
Joel Martin, Iowa Utilities Board.
Crystal McIntyre, Warren County Board of Supervisors and 911.
Brian Flynn, Motorola.
Steve Reeves, Zetron.
Brent Long, Polk County.
Diane Harrods from Zetron.
Curtis Pion, Polk County Sheriff's Office.
Terry McClanahan, Dallas County Sheriff's Office.
Andy Buffington, Winnebago and Hancock County.
Connie Staplebean, Department of Public Safety.
Chris Myers on the SWIC. Stephen Rodriguez, ICN.
Mike Lauer, ICM.
Okay, do we have anybody on the phone?
John Drury,
Mike
Central Link.
Casper, Lynn County Sheriff's Office.
Mary D. Miller, Iowa County 911.
Brenda Vandervoort, Fayette County 911.
Tracy Sanders, Scott Emergency Communications Center.
Okay, thank you and welcome. Could I get a motion to approve today's agenda?
So moved.
I have a motion, and do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. And likewise for the approval of the November 8th minutes. We have a motion, a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. Okay, next I'd like to bring up to the front here Bob Seibert. I'll meet you out front here. For those that don't know, Mike Seibert is one of the original I'm sorry, Bob Seibert. Oh, great. Good, because that's what the plaque says. Bob is one of the original members of the 911 Council. He was certainly here when I started, and there's not very many people that probably know the history of Iowa 911 as much as Bob does, and all the trials and tribulations we've been through, and the professionalism that we've garnered over the years. And really, Bob is one of the people that had an awful lot to do with that. And I just want to make sure that I personally tell him how much I appreciate his years of service, and I'm sure the council as well, and the people of Iowa. So, Bob, I'd like to present this plaque to you for your, and I'll just read it, in grateful appreciation for your years of dedication and outstanding contributions to the State of Iowa 911 program as a member of the State of Iowa 911 Communications Council. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Yes.
Bob, I just wanted to thank you. When I came on the council, took me kind of under your wing and caught me up, and you were always, didn't matter day of the week or time of day, I could always call you and you could help me understand the things a lot of it I didn't understand, especially in the very beginning. So I just wanted to add from myself, the friendship that I've developed with you over the years is just incredible. And I hope you come up and see me in Minnesota, come fishing with me, and we'll continue that friendship. But there's no doubt that 911 in Iowa is better because of the efforts of Bob Seibert. Thanks again.
Thank you, Mike. Okay. State of Iowa Administrator Report.
Good morning, everyone. Show up on the screen. And Bob, feel free to interrupt me at any point and argue with me if you want to. It's just like old time's sake. Actually, my report will be pretty brief today. Just a reminder again that annual reports are due on January 1st. That's the PSAP update form, if any changes are necessary. That basically drives our distribution lists and contact information, so we like to keep that up to date. But if it's all well and good, no need to update it. The local service board form, and then the expenditure collection sheet. The actual legal deadline on the expenditure sheet is in March. We like to get those in early though, so we can look it over, make sure everything's in order, and if there are any changes, give the local jurisdiction time to make those changes. So that's why we asked for those a little bit early. So just a reminder that that deadline is coming up. Next, the GIS grants. The first period is coming to a close. Still time to get your uploads in and get the checks done from GeoCom. Right now, there are 57 counties that have met the benchmarks, and you can see the amount that we've expended so far, $390,000. There'll be probably another dozen or so that do meet those benchmarks in December based on what I already know has been submitted for December in my conversations with GeoCom. So when you think about it, that's about 70 counties. That's pretty good. Just a reminder then that the part of this exercise is really to get PSAPs and counties used to providing this information on a regular basis. So that's the reason for the second upload period as well. That'll start in January. You'll need to upload your information again, as long as you haven't messed it up and as long as you met the benchmarks the first 6-month period, you should be good to go in the second 6-month period. And just because you couldn't meet the benchmarks the first 6 months, you're totally eligible and available to get the $6,000 in the second part of the year. So and we're not touching the benchmarks this year, so it still stays at 98% GIS rate match, 50% ALI, and 50% MSEG. Any questions on the GIS grant?
Do you see the benchmarks changing next year?
Probably. GIS won't. That's where it needs to be to actually use the data, 98%. But we probably will raise ALI and MSAG. And with a lot of the work that's been done so far, I think that'll be a pretty easy, once people get to 50%, just continue to increase it. I haven't settled on a number. I don't know if it'll be 75 or whatever, but we're not going to jump it to 95, which is its end state. It'll eventually need to be to 95%. And just to give you a heads up, at some point down the road, we might ask for this quarterly and not just twice a year. Because again, this is supposed to be real-time information. So to get people used to uploading and providing that data on a regular basis. One of the things that is on the agenda for open discussion is the Public Education and Training Fund. That moratorium is scheduled to be lifted in January. Most of the bills have been paid. We really only have one class that hasn't been paid. And that, as far as I know, is coming in right at the $15,000. So looking at the projections, with APCO and NENA still having a spring conference, there should be right just under $15,000 remaining. I guess it's my intent in January to open that website portion back up. And really the council just kind of needs to determine, you know, if we get $30,000 worth of requests in that first month, do we want to have a plan for that, or are we just going to see what comes in? That's really the reason that I added that onto the agenda. Didn't know if we needed to talk about it anymore, just knowing that next month we're gonna have to make those decisions. Any other questions? Yeah.
Thanks. I got caught. I just noticed today, looks like we just made a quorum, 8 of our 14. So did the other 6 call you and tell you they weren't coming? Are you the contact? I want to make sure that the 8 of us know here, because I don't know how much business, you know, we could do a lot of this information passing along, but if we have business, we were one person from having a flat tire or a sick kid or whatever.
I think 2 or 3 reached out to me, and I usually make sure to share that information with the executive committee.
So I guess maybe we just need to, I don't know if the other 6 are going to read the minutes, but maybe we need to make sure that everybody knows. Is that right? We are supposed to contact you?
I think it's a good reminder. You can certainly contact the chair, the vice chair, the secretary, but normally we share it amongst the 4 of us. So.
I mean, sometimes there may not be anything we can do if it just stuff goes bad, but at least we would know. And then I guess that leads into we've asked the question before, with the answer we've gotten is no, but I know the ISIX does count the people that are on the phone, so I guess.
Tom and I were just talking about that before the meeting as well. 3 or 4 months ago, I was going to reach out to the AG again, and we've had about 3 or 4 assistant AGs over the last year, and it was during that particular month that we were going through a transition again. I will ask if that seems to be what people want to do, is have quorum available over the conference call, I will ask.
I mean, I personally think it's best to be here, but I think we got to get to the quorum, and particularly the winter months. You know, it could be bad where Tom's at and just dandy here.
I will.
So if that's what it takes to get to a quorum, I'd rather see the people here, but I would go along with that exception, I guess, myself, but that's just my opinion.
Okay. I will ask that of our new assistant AG. One final thing, it wasn't a slide, just more information sharing. If you remember, about a year ago, I opened my mouth one too many times and got put on a national committee. I represent my counterparts, NASNA, on the Public Safety Advisory Committee towards FirstNet. So we just had a meeting in Washington on Tuesday. I'm going to make the same offer of the ISIX board. I'm going to type up my notes for NASNA. Nothing earth-shattering by any means, but if anyone is interested in those notes, I would be happy to share them with you as well. Just let me know, or I can, I guess, share them with the council at least. But again, just let me know if you're intensely interested in those notes. Again, nothing really earth-shattering. I just wanted you to know that I was doing that for FirstNet and for the board. If there's no other questions, I will turn it over to Zetron, and Diane Harris is here for that presentation today.
Hi, good morning. It's nice to be here and see everyone. I'm an Iowa native, so it was a pleasure to come back for this today. Like it's not moving. Whoops. So far in November, we added 2 new letters of intent. And in December, we had the first host location going through the final stages of installation and readiness. The proof of concept is installed and running up at Hancock County, and we've had our first 4 binding orders. So year to date now, that brings us to a total of 25 letters of intent. And we've got 12 site surveys in process right now, and again, the 4 binding orders. So we'll continue to be here at the state meetings, and we're always available for questions or anything else after. In the month of January, we have 3 lunch and learn meetings planned around at the district meetings, and we're going to continue to complete the site surveys, partnering with Raycom on that. And as the site surveys are completed, the quotes are delivered to the state and the PSAP for final review. So that's our brief update. If you have any questions.
Just to add on a little bit, I've signed off on about 12 formal quotes. So I think Diane said there's 4 that have been signed. That means signed by me and the PSAP, but there's a number of others that are out there ready to be signed off on by the PSAP. So I expect that number to go up significantly in the next month or 2.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then Stephen from the ICN has his presentation.
Good morning. I have some disappointing news today concerning the wireline RFP that we had out. And just as a reminder, this is for the Camatrunk 911 call delivery for wireline. Unfortunately, none of the responses met the requirements of the RFP. So what our next steps are is now we're revising the RFP, and we hope to get that back out on the streets next week, by the end of next week. So after that, it will be due, the responses will be due back at the end of January, and then we'll evaluate and determine what our next steps are sometime in the February timeframe. Are there any questions?
Steve, we talked a couple months ago in regard to the RFP, and obviously because the RFP was already out, we couldn't have much of a discussion. The telcos, the independent telcos, took the RFP for face value. You requested T1 interfaces to 2 of the ICN POPs. A T1, if you're not familiar with that structure, is capable of handling 24 voice channels, which in turn is 24 911 trunks. We designed those, and we knew this wasn't going to fly, but because your RFP was face value, and we took it at that, we designed 1 T1 with 1 911 trunk on it. Not a very effective use of facilities. We also had to go to Arion to transport it. You wanted diversity between 2 POPs, which today I think the majority of the 911 trunks go to CenturyLink, where they're aggregated and then shipped off through the selective router to the PSAP location. So we need to get to some kind of aggregation, I guess is what I'm getting at. With Arion hauling our 911 trunks, there's going to be some added cost from what we're charging today because of the distance to, in the case of where I work out of Sully, it's we're looking at taking it to Johnston and Mason City, quite a ways from Des Moines in the case of Mason City. So I guess I just want to reiterate that I hope the ICN is taking time to look at the existing network, where it needs to be aggregated, to get the best bang for the buck. We spent a lot of time on your RFP and a lot of effort, and there was some costs involved that we took internally. So I guess if there's any questions from a telco perspective, we'd be happy to talk to you, but I think we need some dialogue before you issue that revised RFP.
Yeah, I know that they are looking into the responses, not only the responses, but also kind of our intent versus what was provided and spelling that out a little bit more. We do generally have a vendor question and answer period after we release the RFP, and unfortunately, those questions didn't come out at that time because we want to make sure that our RFP is valid. We don't have those individual discussions, and so that's why we'd rather have a vendor conference where everyone can participate and know those questions and answers, and that's why we do it that way. But hopefully, the team that is revising it will make it clearer as to what needs to be done, and those 5 point of interconnects. Right now, a lot of the 911 trucks just go to one location, and we want to make that more diverse and put in some redundancy in there. But hopefully, if your questions are not answered in the form that the RFP comes out later next week, that you're able to have those questions answered during that time period.
Okay, I mean, I have 2 trunks. Everybody has 2 trunks or more coming out of the end offices. So basically, telcos aren't necessarily responsible for aggregating those circuits.
Right.
So we're going to price that out to you from our end office depending on your RFP. So I just want to make sure the council understands, the first RFP didn't come out correctly as far as how we're doing the network. So we're happy to help you if you got any questions, but want to make you aware of that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any technical advisory? Okay. All right, next update on Iowa Interoperability Governance Board, Chris Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning to the council. And again, also congratulations to Mr. Sievert over there on the retirement. Hopefully you have a chance to drown some worms here over the next several months when it warms up. First, I guess the first order of business today with the PSAP grant that the board is rolling out to try to help PSAPs get connected to the Network for Basic Interoperability. We are currently wrapping up the process of following up with PSAPs, both those that did respond and those that didn't. What we're working on doing is trying to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to get something to connect if they're not already connected. Our target, again, to get this whole program wrapped up is conclusion of first quarter 2019. I think we're still on pace to hit that. And as of today, we only have about 2 or 3 PSAPs to go as far as getting them the MOA to fill out before we actually place the orders. And then if you kind of look ahead with the calendar, it's probably going to take about 4 to 6 weeks to get everything delivered based on where the holidays fall in December and then in January. And then, of course, any other things with the vacations that personnel take at the various places where these things come from. So we're still on pace to get that done, so that's a good thing. We've started work a little bit more in depth recently as well with neighboring states and interstate interoperability as well. This is something that basically we've decided to have routine meetings now. We're having meetings every quarter with Minnesota and meetings every other month with neighboring states, Wisconsin and Illinois. We're kind of waiting for Nebraska to get some things in order with their interoperability governance structure. We'll start discussions with them, and things should start relatively soon with South Dakota and Missouri as well. So we are working on that. As far as training opportunities go, announcements on the board's asks of what is now ECD will be coming soon. The PSAP cybersecurity webinar that we've talked about loosely is still near the top of the list, if not at the top. Cybersecurity is a moving target, so as long as this class is offered and the material is fresh, it might be something we ask for almost every year. So as we roll those out, especially assuming that cybersecurity webinar is on that list, we will coordinate very closely with the council. If we could get all 113 PSAPs on that webinar, I think that would be exceptional. So I will let you guys know when we have those official asks into ECD and when they are approved. On top of that, some housekeeping with ECD. I'm not sure if you all had a chance to see, but last month the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Act was signed into law by President Trump. What this does is it rearranges a lot of things within the Department of Homeland Security as far as the emergency communications side of it goes. What was OEC is now ECD, the Emergency Communications Division, so that is where Jim Lundstedt will be moved to. He's not in the country right now, he's on vacation with his wife, but I thought I would relay that on to you. For our end, not much is going to change. Most of the changes are administrative level, but it does elevate the emergency communications section of DHS quite a bit, so in the end, that'll probably play in our favor. With regards to the ISIX build out, we're just waiting on maybe one site to get built and coverage testing is ongoing. We will provide updates on that as we can. One last item for those of you that may have been looking at FirstNet, I know Blake had mentioned it previously. I had a chance to speak with some of the FirstNet representatives face to face for an extended period of time at the National Council of SWICS and SAFECOM meeting last month in Norman, Oklahoma. I got some good answers as well about their rollout here. One of the key pieces they're working on right now is a roaming agreement with T-Mobile. If you're familiar with T-Mobile, they recently acquired iWireless. So as that is completed, the FirstNet coverage in Iowa should expand significantly relatively rapidly. I don't know if that roaming agreement will cover T-Mobile's 600 megahertz band of frequencies or not, but if it does, it would help out coverage quite a bit because that 600 megahertz mobile broadband spectrum does carry quite a ways. So with that, I will take any questions. Okay.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And as Chris mentioned, Jim Lundstedt is out of the country. We usually hear from him right now, so we'll move on to the Chapter 34 Administrative Code Committee update.
Okay, so I have handouts for the group. I've set tentative committee for each of the priorities, and then I put the priorities in the back. And it'll be available conference call and at our EOC of Polk County Emergency Management. So if you could just take that, I gave council members. There's already. So basically, I waited until after the first of the year because people have been gone, holidays and so forth. So January 8th, 2019, 9 a.m. to noon will be that priority 1, which is define or better define the PSAP and 911 Service Board. January 8th in the afternoon, 1 to 4, priority 2, funding. January 9th, 9 a.m. to noon, priority 3, political subdivision. January 15th, 9 a.m. to noon, priority 4, miscellaneous technology. And the 15th from 1 to 4, priority 5, the 911 council. So Blake will provide the conference call line. If you can only attend part of the meeting, that's fine. All we just need is more participation. We need whatever experience you bring. We want that to the table so we are inclusive. And we make sure that any changes that are drafted with Chapter 34A is going to serve the entire state of Iowa and the 911 community, the dispatchers, the people in supervisory roles, the technical experts. We want to make sure this is the code that we want as a state of Iowa and kind of start leading the way for other states to look at and revise and be more inclusive to the people they serve. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Tracy. And as we've said before, we really, really do encourage people to take part in this committee, and the committee has made it very easy for you to take part by breaking things up by subject like this. You don't have to participate in things that maybe don't necessarily appeal to you, but if there's something specific that you are, you can certainly take advantage of those specific meetings. So I have heard from some people that, you know, did voice concern about opening up 34A, and of course, anytime you open up legislation, there's always a risk of things not going your way. So all I can do is tell people who have those worries to please take part in this committee.
And the other thing is, please, Blake's going to send out an electronic version as well. Please send these out to your different groups that you work with and you serve. I'm going to send it out to the Polk County Fire Chiefs, the Plexa, and my 911 Service Board, Emergency Management Commission. Send these out to the people that you're working with. Let them have a voice, so hopefully you can create better working relationships as well. And so they understand why this is important and why you do what you do and why you need certain things and funding. It's important that we're all on the same page. So send out, the more the better.
Thank you. Okay, legislative issues. Okay. So Blake already kind of mentioned it, discussing the lifting of the moratorium on council travel, public education, and training funds. As we're getting here to the halfway point, that's a conversation that we knew had to come. Blake, what is our balance?
It'll be about $15,000 that's remaining. When I've looked back at past amounts of council travel, it's around $5,000 a year. So some of that's already been, claimed, utilized. So some of that's already accounted for. We're 6 months into the year. So I guess I would just remind everyone that it's not just training. You still do have to save some for council travel. I don't know what anyone's plans are to go to National APCO, NENA, any other 911 related conference. I haven't heard anything, but that doesn't mean it's a ways away still. So I would recommend, maybe still not expending or approving $3,000, $4,000, something like that, just to hold back in reserve for council travel. That was, when you look at the priorities, council travel is the first one. So don't forget about that. But like I said, there should be around $15,000. It's $14,997 that will be remaining when that opens back up in January.
Okay. And we can also approve just a portion of it too, so we can at least provide some funding. So I think that's important too, because maybe we can't fund everything, but at least we could help them a little bit so they can get funding elsewhere and they don't have to expend all their resources and the training can't go on. So.
Yeah, that's certainly true. And obviously, as Blake said, if anyone on the council is planning to attend a conference of some distance, you want to be thinking about that and making sure that we do set aside the money for that. Any other further discussion on that?
I guess I have a question for Blake on policies so I'll just make up a hypothetical numbers around 50 hard bill school hand Luke is a nice round number. So there's some odd $1,000. We want to hold back $4,000. Somebody applies for $15,000. Separately, we got to address if we get more than one application, but somebody applies for 15. Can we approve 10 and subsequently, if there's any remaining balance on June 30th, push that money to them at that time? To zero out that account, so to speak? Wouldn't be guaranteed to them, but it would be, or is that too complicated in
the training would have to occur.
Right, the training happens.
Right.
It was 15,000.
Yeah.
We only approved 10,
Yeah.
but also approved any remaining funds left in the account to second check, I guess, if you will, later submission, if there was.
Yeah, I mean, if there was only the one training request out there,
Right.
or, at the time we told them we have $2,000, I see you asking for $4,000.
Yep.
If there's any funds available at the end and you've gone ahead and held the training, that's important too.
Yep.
Yeah, we would make it available to you at that time. Yeah, that would work. Right now in the policy document, it basically says first come, first serve. And then on the month or in the month that the funds are requested and go over the amount, it's up to the council to basically adjudicate that. So it's not necessarily first come, first serve in that particular month. It's up to the council, which I think gives us, leverage on picking the best options and making the right choice based on funding decisions, not just first come, first serve. So in January, if there's $20,000, you all get to pick where it goes if it's multiple requests.
I know it was also mentioned before that a good place to use some of this ending fund balance would be working through ILEA. Have they expressed any interest in sponsoring any training?
They have, and I was just in a meeting yesterday with Carol, and I know her office is a little bit up in the air with where the training would be held, with their facility not being operational right now, but it kind of sounds like they're being bounced back and forth between buildings on Camp Dodge. But yeah, her and I have had that conversation that I think she is interested, should there be funding available. It seems like it's a central location, well-known, respected, used place for funding, but I know there's counties out there that want to submit an application as well.
Certainly. And I think it's great that we get it out. The worst case scenario would be that we had money left when we're sitting here talking about whether or not we can get that $100,000 raised. The last thing we want to do is leave a balance in there. Okay, any other discussion? Okay. The next item, we had an issue with as to whether or not we had approved the 911 Council bylaws. And we had a little trouble finding that in the past agendas, and it's quite possible that that it was not approved by the board. So we'd like to take care of that now.
Sean, could you see if I pop that correctly onto the other screen? Oh boy. Good grief. And I think Kara has some handouts as well, not enough for everyone. Really, this kind of came up, it's from legislation a year and a half ago. It's removing the E's enhanced from E911, so it's just 911, and it's adding the IJIC representative to the council. The drafts were sent out a year and a half ago. I think it was kind of during that transition when Sally got sick and wasn't able to make it as much, and I think it just fell off everyone's radar. There shouldn't be anything controversial. It's really just matching the bylaws with 34A from a year and a half ago. But if there are any questions, let us know. We can answer them.
Does anybody have any questions out here in the board? Okay. So I'd like to entertain a motion that we approve the 911 Council bylaws as presented.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. Okay. Yes, Mike.
Can we back up one step? So on the funds, I just have a question. Do we want to address, it appears to me from listening to Blake that there's going to be more requests than we have money. So do we want to address today before that's positively how we're going to do it, or versus potentially make up rules after we get those, see how, which is, I don't know which is easier, which is better.
I think it would help me if I could see what the requests were going to be and what it is we're talking about, what type of training it was,
okay, in
order to kind of weigh which ones have the support.
Okay.
But you're right. I mean, I think that's something we definitely have to deal with quicker than not.
It's just really hypothetical right now. So, other than keeping a little bit remaining for council travel, it's hard to say, what to do or how to make a recommendation other than to remind the council that you all have the authority to
to mix and match or do what you want in that particular month that we go over the amount that we have available.
I think it's important that the people that are applying for that funding are either present via conference call or present, because if we have to make a decision of expending money in one training over the other, we need to be able to ask some questions. So, so we could divide the money up between the equally, or, we just be able to be present for questions. I think that's important, especially when we have to make a decision and we can't just say, okay, first come, first serve, everyone gets funded.
Yeah, and that certainly happened before, where we've had applications and we didn't have anybody that could answer a question or two, and having a delay in your appropriation is not going to help your training scenario. So certainly get applications in quickly and then be available for questions at that meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, moving on to new business. I'll just read it as written here in the agenda. To discuss the possibility of this council supporting baseline knowledge standards for frontline 911 professionals in Iowa. Should this council recommend minimum standards to ensure a standard of professionalism concerning the receipt and dispositions of emergency calls throughout the state of Iowa, and should such training be mandated within 34A? That's a subject that has come up a few times since I've been on the council, and I'm sure Bob probably has heard this question brought up as well. And in the context that I've always heard the discussion is, does the public expect a certain standard of 911 service no matter where they're standing and wherever they're calling 911? Is there a level that you should expect throughout the state of Iowa no matter where you're at? That's the context that I've thought of it in. I'm sure there's other contexts to think of as well. But it's something, like I said, that's been talked about a lot, and I think it's probably time to get a little more formal in the discussions. I'm not saying that it is something that we should or shouldn't do. I think it's just something that needs to come to the forefront of conversation. And then thinking about if you did have standards, how would you ensure those standards throughout the state? Is it something for 34A? 34A, when it comes to standards, makes me a little bit nervous in that we know how sluggish it is to bring legislation up to the technical aspects that are ever changing. And so I think in that regard, we'd have to be very careful, because we don't want to have technology pass what's written. And I think that's probably some of the issues that we have in 34A now, is that it's gotten a little old-fashioned in the technology at hand. So, but those are definitely things that I think should be discussed. There was an idea as to whether this was something that the 34A committee should be looking at, or should it be a separate committee or a subcommittee or whatever. Those are all things we can talk about.
I was really interested.
This is Sarah from.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just really interested to hear what the audience had to say regarding this topic, and to start a dialogue where we can hopefully air this out one way or another.
So this is Sarah from the Ames Police Department. My question is, wouldn't those standards be maintained, or wouldn't we show that those standards are being met in the legislation that states we have every dispatcher who has the 40-hour mandatory training? And would it fit to put this training at ILEA and then define or maybe refine what that training looks like?
Well, that is certainly something that has been brought up as well before. So that's my first issue would be, how would you, if you didn't have some central agency like ILEA, excuse me, looking at this, who would it be, and how would you maintain those standards, and how would you outside of that, look in each PSAP and see that standards are being followed. So I agree with you, Sarah, that that seems to be a logical place to talk about those standards and ensure that they're being followed.
Well, and I guess if meeting those standards, whatever they end up being, doesn't come from the training being held and provided by ILEA, if nothing else, they could be the repository or be the governing board that ensures each dispatcher has met those standards or qualifications. Maybe that's something we need to look at writing in. I mean, I'm just brainstorming.
Well, I also think
So
that
maybe that's something.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Tracy.
I also think that's something that has to look at the coordinators too, because like for me, for example, I came in, I didn't have a lot of 911, I have a lot of education and policy and background. So then you have people that have a plethora of experience of 911, were former dispatchers, and don't have other training. So we have a mixed bag of great knowledge of whether it's book knowledge or whether it's, everyday work knowledge and expertise in the area of 911. But where do we standardize that? Where do we get everybody on equal footing? Because you can learn on the job, and I have learned a lot, but I'm still not at the same people that have 29 years of experience. So if we can give everybody that same experience and expertise and being able to look at the code and the 911 subject matter, that's huge. And that can help transition them when they come into a position and they're moving up. I think, the Iowa Emergency Management for their emergency managers and coordinators do this. And I think that would be something that we need to kind of look over and see what they do, because I think it kind of bring us up to the same level and standard things across the state. And I think Chapter 34A, while it takes a long time to get implemented, we're going through this process now. A great place to put this in is with the increased training funds, and we could also put different standards and training for the people in the state of Iowa that work with 911.
When I'd like to speak to your comparison to emergency management, and I understand and respect the training and the education or the knowledge and education that you reference. However, dispatchers' professions are more than 29 or 40 years of knowledge that they have. They also have a well-being that needs to be taken care of. And somewhere as a profession, we need to start including that, because we have people who have been dispatchers 5 years and 40 years, and because there is nothing aiding their mental well-being, now what are we leaving them in? Just like the protected class for public officials or law enforcement or firefighters. So I don't know. I think this is the right place to put it, but I think I don't disagree with you about the knowledge and the information you learn, but I also think we need to take care of them as a person, as a whole, rather than a skill set that we teach them. So,
and there's nothing.
I think it's trending in our profession, and I think we need to jump on and seize this opportunity to take care of our people.
And maybe we can add that into it and make sure that there's that whole body where you're looking at not only how they cope with stress, and so when they come in, they have those resources, and so that we know we provide them those tools that they need to continue to take them throughout their career, so they don't just stay in for 5 years and burn out because they don't have the ability to get the resources, and they're so short-staffed that they don't be able to go out and reach out and seek assistance after taking multiple hard calls. So that mind-body connection, there's nothing saying that we can't add that to that core curriculum.
Right.
Hey, Sarah.
Sure, yeah, which is why I advocate for having continuing education that's mandatory year after year, because you can give them those resources in that first year of their career when they're learning, but when you're in your third year and you take that call, that part's already been purged from your mind, and you've already created bad habits that are going to be difficult to undo as your career continues to grow, just like any other profession. So just my 10 cents worth.
Yes.
I
My opinion only is, I know we've got legislation that results.
Hang on, need a mic.
How to work this thing, I'm not technical.
But the people on the phone can't hear you.
He fixed it. Okay. There is already legislation, I believe. I don't know where, I was asking Bob, and he doesn't remember which code, or which chapter, that mandates the hours of training, and it's all through ILEA. I think you talked about it a little bit. There's the ongoing education that's in there. I think it's a good idea to look at this. I think it should be standardized, and maybe that we should maybe to put it back to that training board that is already in place. And 34A has a lot in it, and I'm not opposed to addressing some of the things that are in there and making it better. But do we want to start pouring more things into it that already exist in another part of the code and that is already mandated through a training board through ILEA who does standardize it for the entire state?
Right, and I agree with you, again, with ILEA. I can't think of a better organization that would take that role of that standard training. The only thing I'll remind myself is how multifaceted 911 is, and I think this discussion would center a lot on training and standardized training, but I think there's also other things, as was mentioned, coordinators, and then I would also look at the knowledge that the members of your local commissions have. As local commissions changed hands and there was some changes in who is allowed to be on those commissions, just for my own commission, we lost a lot of knowledge when those seats changed, and you might be sitting in a commission with several people that really haven't got a clue what you're even talking about, and so that's just another facet of the 911 standardization. If there was some place that those people, coordinators and commission members, could go to learn and get to know 911 and understand it better, they could serve much better the citizens.
And there was an example just a couple years ago where Blake basically gave guidance to all the 911 coordinators with regard to preparing budgets and the declaration of, correct me if I'm wrong, Blake, but it was designated versus undesignated funds. And the hope was that guidance would see a reduction in the statewide in the undesignated amount of funding from year to year. The first year it actually went up. So that was kind of the first eye-opening experience for me, where I felt like Blake's instructions were very clear and the rationale was very sound. But because of all the backgrounds that we see in the state of Iowa with regard to 911 and interpretations, Mr. Seibert will probably get a chuckle out of this, the many interpretations of 34A and more specifically the 911 service boards, the makeup of them. There's just so many different variations that something as simple as a little guidance on a budget, we can't necessarily get to the desired result.
Right.
So there's kind of, this is a super preliminary discussion. There was a few of us that got together on a conference call, and Jeff had put together kind of just a list of stuff that was thrown on a wall, that could be potential training topics. And then the other thing that I remembered from one of my discussions was Nina, along with a nonprofit organization, the name escapes me, put together some recommended minimum training guidelines nationwide for 911. So kind of working off two of those lists, and it sounds like between Sarah and Judy and whoever else, there's a couple people that are definitely interested in this topic. I would certainly be happy to send you those two lists of training to see, so you guys can get caught up to speed on what's been talked about and what's been written down just as a starting point. And again, anyone else that's interested in that topic, I'd have no problem sharing that with. And again, it's super preliminary. I think Carol Ann Smith couldn't be on that conference call that we had, but I brought her up to speed after the fact. And, we need her, intense input into this topic as well. I think it's really good discussion as well. And the more the merrier.
Okay. So obviously there's a,
This is,
yep. Go ahead.
hi, this is Mary Miller from Iowa County. And for those who aren't familiar, they should probably review Iowa Telecommunicator Standards, ADB 11C, and also the Iowa Administrative Code for telecommunicator training. Some people may not be familiar with those guidelines that we already have.
Iowa Code 501, 13.3 establishes the basic training course that Judy was referring to with the 40 hours, what needs to be taught. It explains who can instruct. That's all in the administrative code.
So are you fairly familiar with the language in that?
And where that is?
A little bit, and I'm looking at it now. I have it up.
So my question would be, does it look like the language in there is fairly up to date, or is it looking like it's starting to lag?
Yeah, it hasn't been updated for a while. Go ahead.
I just thinking that was what I was thinking that part of the code that I was referring to, but maybe that's where the council should direct us to start looking at that and making the changes there and bringing that up to speed versus 34A.
And there is a telecommunicator training board already established per the code.
Which hasn't met in a very long time.
Yeah.
To kind of keep that, maybe talk to Carol about getting that reinstated or more active.
Because the syllabus has pretty much been the same.
Yes, I think she made some changes when she.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what I would intend to do here then is I'll move this into our next meeting, and I think what we really kind of need to think about is what our approach to this is. We could sit here all day and talk about all the things that we could do and change and all that, and that might be best left to the committee. But these are all great ideas that need to be discussed. So really, it comes down to what vehicle do we use to approach these things. So perhaps if we get that on the next agenda, we can talk about how to approach that again. As I mentioned before, is it going to be a standalone committee? It seems to me that this is a pretty big bite to chew on here, and I don't know that necessarily the 34A committee by itself would enjoy taking this on. Maybe as a subcommittee again for that,
Well,
or something like that. I don't know.
What I'm going to recommend is just at least, if you have interest in this topic, if you can jump on the call on that January 8th or come in from that 1 to 4, maybe we can discuss a little bit. And while 34A might not be that vehicle, we can discuss some recommendations to the council saying, well, this is another avenue that this could be looked at, just so that this could be moved forward. And so we'll preface that maybe it might not be 34A where this will fit, but at least that committee that's meeting on the 8th, we have a date. People that are interested in this topic, jump on the call or come over to the EOC, and then we can figure out maybe another vehicle or updating the code where it already exists. So at least we have some people working on it, and then it can move into a recommendation to the council, and then the council can go from there. Just so we kind of get people that are interested in it, and then kind of move forward.
Right. Absolutely. We need help, and we need the vehicle. So. Okay, thank you. And this might be a good time to bring up, since we're kind of relying on, obviously we're always relying on our next meeting, and I should have probably said this last meeting. If we do have weather that affects our meetings, I'll always try to reach out to the council members and try to make a decision about whether we ever have to cancel a meeting the night before. I don't want people getting halfway here and then finding out that we're canceled. So we have people traveling from all around the state, obviously. It might be a storm where you're getting, well, the last one we had 16 inches just, 45 minutes away from me, and I got nothing. So, but just reminding people to to keep an eye on the emails, and a decision would be made the previous night so that we don't have people on the road unnecessarily. Was there somebody on the phone that was trying to say something? Thought I heard something. Okay. Moving on, I don't believe we have any travel requests. Okay. Any business from the floor? Okay. I have a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.